Reading from Job chapter 7, verses 7 to 11. Remember, O God, my life is only a breath. My happiness has already ended. You see me now, but never again. If you look for me, I'll be gone. Like a cloud that fades and is gone, people die and never return. They are forgotten by all who knew them. No, I can't be quiet. I am angry and bitter. I have to speak. Growing up in the evangelical Christian tradition, there was this very strong focus on what you might call the victorious Christian life. The idea that the faithful Christian disciple always submits, always trusts, always perseveres, that like Paul in prison, he or she finds contentment in all things. That to trust God is the ultimate expression of a deep religious Christian piety, a holiness, and to express fear, questioning, doubt, anger at God is simply incompatible with that life of devout, deep, holy, pious, victorious Christian living. And yet you have the witness of people like Job, people who actually have the temerity, the forthrightness, the honesty to get angry with God. This has led me over the years to come to terms with the extent to which, in fact, the Christianity I was given when I was being raised, the Christianity that says, no, life is just about victorious Christian living. There's no room for sadness, for questioning, for doubt, for getting angry with God. That I've come to realize is in fact a truncated view, and that the reality of Christian life involves, among other things, the full gamut of emotion, including that which is expressed by Job. Now, myself, personally, I've been in the shallow end of the pool for my life when it comes to suffering. I've suffered here and there in some ways, but not the way that some people have suffered. I think, for example, some years ago, I was watching an episode of the program Oprah, and Oprah had on a family who was involved in a terrible limousine accident. They were in the back of the limousine when it ran into a large truck. The limousine was destroyed. Several people were killed. And when the police officer arrived at the scene, the mother emerged from the limousine holding the severed head of her small daughter. Her daughter had been in a seatbelt, and the seatbelt had severed the child's head upon impact. And now the mother just had the head. And as this woman relayed this story, this experience of unimaginable suffering and pain and loss on Oprah, as you can imagine, the entire audience was just overwhelmed by the inability to grasp the depth of grief that this mother and the family would have experienced. I sensed just a taste of that grief as well. But in that moment, I was also filled with a deep, seething anger. And it was an anger at God, the God who oversees providentially all the events of the universe, the God who knew that this was going to happen, the God that could have willed to prevent this child from being decapitated in this most heinous, unbelievable, violent way. Growing up in that evangelical Christian tradition, there was no room for that kind of emotion of anger and rage at God. But I was delighted, relieved, I should say, to find within the words of Job a recognition, an invitation that in fact the Christian life can include, in fact, likely will include at some point, anger against God. And over the years, then I've come to recognize that the story of victorious Christian living is really just a part of the story. It's kind of like the person who wants to enter into a marriage, but only on the condition that there are no down times in the marriage, that there's no dark night of the soul, there's no sickness, there's no for want in the life of marriage. Of course there is. There will be down times in marriage. But the actual deep marriage, the marriage that is going to stand the test of time, is not the marriage that never experiences downtimes. It's the marriage in which the partners can recognize and be honest about the downtimes and yet persevere through them. And so it is with the life of Christian discipleship. Rage and anger against God should not be the end goal, of course, but to believe, to be told that there is no place for rage and anger against God. There's no place for questioning and doubting God, for being uncertain, for having depression, or for that whole range of human emotion. That's just not being honest. That's like wanting to have the delusion of a marriage with no down times, with no bad times. But in fact, the full life of Christian discipleship is a life that embraces the full gamut of human experience. And that can include, indeed, anger against God, rage against God, seething rage against God. And if you think about it, God, by definition, is a being who is omniscient, who knows all things. So there is something especially self-defeating about the idea that a person undoubtedly will experience anger against God at some point in their life, that they would not be honest about that they would try to pretend that they're not actually angry about God. There's no point to that. God already knows that you're angry. The true Christian life of discipleship, of depth of experience, is the life, the walk following Christ that is willing to embrace and to recognize doubt and indeed anger against God, not to deny it, but to recognize that, like with Job, sometimes we can say to God, I am angry with you and I have to speak.